Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock and welcome members of the management team, Superintendent Eberwin, Secretary Treasurer Reed, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, and Directors of Instruction Braniff and Hunter. From our partners, I see you, Ms. Sinclair, Ms. Layla Sinclair Wise from the Saanich Administrators Association. Mr. McEwen in the corner from the Saanich Teachers Association. Ms. Welch, are you with us?
Yeah, she's up there.
All right, welcome.
Yes, I am.
Welcome, Nola from QP 441. I don't think that we have anyone from the parents from the Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils of Saanich, but if someone logs on, you'll let me know, Secretary Treasurer, at that time perhaps. And of course, I wish to acknowledge that the board is this evening meeting on the traditional lands and territories of the Wasanich people who have lived, learned, and worked on these lands since time immemorial, and we offer this acknowledgement gratefully, respectfully, sincerely, and recognizing its importance as a measure intended to encourage true reconciliation with our neighbors. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Trustee Stelk, seconder. Trustee Van Well. Are there any late items or revisions to the agenda? Trustee Holman?
Thank you, Chair. I submit respectfully 2 notices of motion for the April meeting. Copies have been distributed to everyone here today. Additionally, just for expediency and helpfulness, I've submitted motions relevant to item 7 and item 10 on our agenda this evening.
Yes, thank you. I should note, I don't think you need a motion to amend the agenda, Trustee Holman, at all.
Okay.
First, with respect to your notices of motion for the April meeting, section 2.25 of Policy 9 requires a notice of motion with respect to a proposal to change a standing rule or order or policy or bylaw of the board. These do not intend to do that. So you're free to not apply, that's a legal term, move an amendment to the April agenda when it comes to include these. And then second, with respect to your 2 other motions, one with respect to the strategic plan and the energy sustainability plan, those 2 items are on tonight's agenda, so you're entitled to bring those motions at that time when they're being discussed.
Thank you, Chair. The notice of motion, I would prefer that there's an opportunity of time for people to consider and formulate other information to engage. So I'm not in a rush for those this evening.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Thank you. And Trustee Silzer.
Yes, Chair. I would like to add to the agenda the item of Indigenous participation in the Board of Education governance.
And you've circulated, I think, 2 motions with respect to that, Trustee Silzer. And if the agenda is amended, I would propose that go in other business as submitted. Is there a seconder for Trustee Silzer's motion to amend the agenda? Trustee Holman. So under other business as submitted, we will have a second item. We will need to vote, yes, but pending our vote, we would have an item for Indigenous participation at the board table. Would that properly describe it? All right. Is there any debate on that motion? Trustee Silzer, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, adding that.
To adding it, not the merits, not the substance, but to adding it.
I think it fits with our discussion of the strategic plan and the goal of Indigenous education, enhancing Indigenous education, and I think it's an appropriate time for the board to look at this.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to amend the agenda by adding Indigenous participation at the board level before we put the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. You're in, Trustee Silser. Anything further, trustees? All right, then I'll call for a vote on the adoption of the agenda as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Prior to this regular meeting, the board held an in-camera meeting wherein we discussed personnel matters and business affairs. Moving to item 3, adoption of the board meeting minutes of February 16, 2022. Mr. Reid, there is a correction required to these, correct?
That's, Trustee Selk contacted me earlier today and identified a correction in the minutes, and we looked into it, and I agree with the correction. So it's in the regular minutes of February 16th on page 6, and it's the item for correspondence, the letter from Copax. The correction is to remove under that the motion be tabled, to remove the words defeated and then main motion and the wording of the main motion, and then continue with carried, because what the minutes currently reflect was that the motion to table was defeated and the motion on the floor was carried, when in fact the motion to table was carried. And so the main motion was tabled.
Right.
And so that correction will be reflected in the minutes, and then also the recording of the trustees who were in opposition to the motion. The minutes reflects Trustee Holman and Trustee Stelk, and it should be Trustee Holman and Trustee Silser. So those corrections will be made as well.
Thank you. Is there agreement, trustees, to make those 2 amendments? Thank you. All right. Are there any other errors or omissions in the minutes of February 16, 2022? Hearing none, then I declare that the minutes will be adopted with those amendments and corrections noted by the Secretary Treasurer. Item 4 is business arising from the minutes, and that is the Energy Sustainability Report and the motion by the board that the referral of the summary of recommendations on page 25 come to this meeting. Mr. Reid, do you wish to open on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report is included in the board's agenda, and the summary of recommendations is on page 25, which is what the motion references referred to this meeting. That included a number of recommendations in our energy report that we were implementing relating to buildings, transportation, and paper to reduce energy consumption and our carbon footprint.
Trustee Holman.
Thank you, Chair. I obviously missed the business arising and referenced a motion under FF&T, but I would like to make it at this point.
Sure.
So I would move that the board endorse all recommendations contained in the Energy Sustainability Plan, the report summary of recommendations on page 28, and request staff to further the described initiatives within the district.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Trustee Silser. Trustee Holman, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I would just like to congratulate staff and the consultant that worked on the report for identifying some very specific actions that could be taken, and some ways that we could move it along immediately, and some ways that we could advocate for broader, more ambitious targets. So I congratulate them and hope that we can all agree to support them.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy.
Thanks, Chair. A question, I think, through you to the Secretary Treasurer, perhaps, about buildings number 1. Could you comment on the recommendation by the consultant that we engage qualified consultants in an ongoing comprehensive energy management program? I'm just wondering about, is that if we as a board adopt this recommendation, does that mean that we have to engage energy consultants on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, through the chair, while this report was prepared for us by a consultant, we reviewed this report, and we in consultation formulated the recommendations. And so we're in agreement with the recommendation that to inform our energy plan going forward, it is necessary to seek that outside expertise to track data and identify opportunities and to report on our energy consumption. So we're in agreement with that recommendation.
Would it be appropriate, sorry,
And just to add to that, it doesn't say that we would continue to stay with the consultant we're currently working with, but that we would seek that outside expertise as required.
would it be appropriate, do you think, to insert the words as necessary, engage qualified consultants as necessary in an ongoing comprehensive energy management program?
I think it would be fine, but I think
That's the intent.
that's the intent of the,
I just think if we said as necessary, it would make it more clear that we don't have to do it if there's no need, that's all. Chair, I would seek agreement from the board to just, if we could put those words in. If not, I'll move a motion.
Is there agreement, trustees, to Trustee McMurphy's proposed amendment to Trustee Holman's motion that the words, and they were again, Trustee McMurphy, as
necessary. Yeah.
As necessary in item which?
In number 1, buildings, engage qualified consultants as necessary.
Right. Is there any objection to that? Trustee Holman, you're objecting? All right. Would you make your motion? Is there a seconder for Trustee Murphy's motion amendment? Trustee Van Well, Trustee McMurphy, anything further? Any discussion? Trustee Holman.
It's my understanding that at one time we had a position on staff that was paid through some granting money or money available through another agency. And when that funding no longer existed, and there was sort of a step that it would fall to staff. And my assumption, based on the recommendation, is that there isn't either the expertise or the resources internally to provide the level of advice on the plan. And so I would like to check my assumption on that if that's appropriate before we vote.
Mr. Reid?
yeah, that is correct. The model that we are working with now is the work is done by staff, but as is required, we do engage the expertise of consultants. That includes Ready Energy that prepared the sustainability plan, but it also included, we engaged an expert in HVAC systems and that company did an audit of all of our schools. And so our strategy to engaging consultants is to seek out that narrow and very deep experience that we just cannot maintain in-house. It's similar to engaging specialist lawyers or other professionals as required.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment, proposed amendment? Put the question then that Trustee McMurphy's proposed amendment to add the words as necessary and place noted. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, back to the main motion as amended. Is there further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll put the question then on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Is there anything further to be discussed with respect to this item, the Energy Sustainability Report? Hearing none, we'll move then, thank you, to item 5, presentations, delegations, and questions.
And Josh is with us.
And we have the presenter here, Mr. Brand.
Yeah, Mr. Brand is with us.
All right. Where would we like Mr. Brand?
He'll be right over here.
Okay. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much.
All right. Before you start, sir, I'll just remind the meeting of the policy provisions with respect to presentations.
Okay.
They are 5 minutes at the most. Trustees thereafter will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification. And normally speaking, the board will not take action on the presentation or request at the same meeting in order to give time for it to percolate. or think about it. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on the traditional land. Oh, a question?
I'm sorry, Josh, I'm not sure, as your introduction, are you representing an organization? Are you here as yourself?
Yeah, I'm here representing a group of parents from Deep Cove School Elementary, just in my neighborhood. Yeah.
We'll start your 5 minutes again with that clarification. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this evening on the traditional lands of the Spanish people. My presentation, slide please. My presentation will cover using existing bus capacity, safety concerns, congestion issues, and suggestions. My name is Josh Brand, and I'm a Deep Cove Elementary School parent and a former alum. I'm an active transport enthusiast, and I have roughly 2 decades of experience working in the transportation industry, including some time driving a school bus in Australia. I'm familiar with the Deep Cove School catchment, active transport infrastructure, and the complexities around altering school route schedules. Our neighborhood is growing with families with school-age children. I'm here to represent a group of Deep Cove Elementary parents who are concerned about unsafe walking routes. I canvassed the parents of about 30 Deep Cove Elementary or North Saanich Middle School students who would benefit from rerouting the existing AM and PM route through Hedgerow and Reddings, and they've signed a petition which I'll circulate after my presentation. Based on the 2021-2022 pickup and drop-off schedule for bus 2.2 and 2.1 route, this detour will not impact any existing riders. Before coming to you, I've consulted with other parents, the school principal, the transportation department, and this presentation is a result of those consultations. Last slide. Sorry, and yeah, one more, please. One more. I appreciate that many of us likely had to walk 4 kilometers to school in the snow both ways when we were in elementary school.
Without
But
seats.
for a variety of reasons, few parents are comfortable permitting their primary age children to walk to school unsupervised. Slide, please. The Saanich School Board defines elementary school walk limits for kindergarten to grade 5 students as 4 kilometers. Slide, please. I don't know how the 4 kilometer walk limit was established. The school board office to Elk Lake is 4 kilometers, and that doesn't feel like a walking distance. This chart illustrates how mode of transportation changes with distance from school. Within about a kilometer of school, 80% of students walk. For 2.4 to 3.2 kilometers, it's below 10%. And over 3.2 kilometers, hardly anyone walks, which isn't surprising, since a 4 kilometer walk would take a determined second grader with adult supervision 48 minutes. If they're lucky enough to have a caregiver that can invest an hour and a half each morning and then an hour and a half each afternoon to walk their kid to school. Slide, please. Students who live within 4 kilometers of their Saanich School District Elementary School are considered courtesy riders. Slide, please. My children's commute includes Blind Corners, slide. Blind Hills, slide please. Narrow Shoulders, slide please. And busy roads with speeding traffic, no sidewalks or pedestrian crossings. Slide please. With permanent daylight savings time seemingly in the cards, this route will be even less safe for walking. I like more factors considered for transportation planners around route safety when considering additional transportation under section 2 of the policy. Slide please. This isn't just about safety though. There's a real opportunity in line with the district's plan to be a leader in sustainability to use school bus transportation to cut down on the emissions and congestion caused by school drop-off lines. Each morning and afternoon, a member of our family joins a caravan of personal vehicles en route to or from Deep Coast Elementary School, where we grapple for parking along the side streets of the school. Concurrently, a near-empty school bus drives along the perimeter road with 16 registered students in the morning and 9 registered students in the afternoon. Slide, please. A more flexible transportation policy that looks beyond a simple distance calculation and sees all potential riders as benefit, not a burden, would serve more students and parents, reduce emissions, reduce congestion around the school, and of course, improve safety. Every bus travels to the school from 4 kilometers away. Every bus that travels from the school from 4 kilometers away needs to get there somehow. So why not transit through the most densely populated neighborhoods, especially when the route change would have minimal impact to the current schedule. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So before you leave, trustees, are there any questions you may have for Mr. Brand? Trustee Holman?
I have 2. The first is whether any review discussion has occurred with, I believe there's initiatives at the school level between the CRD, local police, and the municipalities to look at active transportation and safety concerns. Has there been any recent review or information that's come to you to inform the presentation?
I contacted that initiative. Unfortunately, I missed the deadline for this year. I wasn't aware of the program until fairly recently. And they mentioned that they will consider EPO for next year. There's a few steps that need to take place. We need to have support from the PAC and the school administration to support that initiative. But I'm hoping within the existing school board policy, we can address minor changes. I've also participated in the active transport review for North Saanich, and there are some very positive changes coming within the next 20 years. But I'm hoping that when we have a demographic that's demanding this transportation, it's not going, and it's a relatively easy change, we can use the existing policy to make these changes to cater to the existing growing demographic.
And last, I'm wondering, can you highlight for me exactly what your ask is? What would you like us to do?
I would like, I think that it would be nice to have some evidence-based decisions on what is considered an acceptable walking limit for kindergarten to grade 5 students. I know that this 4 kilometer maximum is shared by Victoria School District, also on South Spring, but there's other municipalities where it's 1 kilometer, 1.2 kilometer. That's the Alberta School Board Act is that distance. Ontario also. So I'd like that to be considered. And I'd also like there to be a regular review of a regular review of changing demographics in the neighborhood. So if there's a larger proportion of families who've moved into a neighborhood that could be better serviced with the existing bus infrastructure, I'd like that to be a consideration. And I think the terrain also. The terrain should be factored in, the walking infrastructure, sidewalks, lighting. It shouldn't just be a distance issue. Right now, because I'm within that distance, there's that seems to be a bit of a roadblock.
And Trustee Silzer.
I was going to ask the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stelk.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, through the chair, if it's possible to get quite a bit of information to have a copy of the presentation?
Is that, we have one sheet, Mr. Brand. You have obviously all the slides.
Yeah, I'd be happy if you'd like to share the slides.
If you could.
Yeah.
I've got them, so I'll share.
Yeah, I was trying to stay within my time. So
No, we appreciate that. And Trustee McMurphy.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Mr. Brand. if I'm correct, you were, one of your suggestions was to route the bus up through Hedgerow and some other, what was the other street you suggested?
Hedgerow and Reading, so it's,
Is it on
the existing,
Eagle Way.
route is on
Oh,
there.
okay. And it may say on here, what would be the additional,
It's 200 meters extra, length and distance. Yeah, so on the top left,
yeah, okay.
this is the existing route. It runs along the water, so, and the homes that it services on that road, are not high-density homes for elementary school children.
And Hedgerow and Reddings are much more difficult streets too, aren't they?
Well, there's terrain, there's blind corners. On my street alone, there are 9 kids who would hop onto this bus every day. And throughout these neighborhoods, they're all kids. I think parents would feel more comfortable sending their kids down their street to Hedgerow or Reddings than having them sit on Lansing Road where vehicles often travel 70 or 80 kilometers per hour.
Thank you for your presentation.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us and provide us with this information. And I appreciate your efforts to come and engage directly with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please feel free to contact me if you'd like to discuss the matter further. And was my petition?
No, I didn't pass it out.
You have some more for us?
This is just the parents, this copies of the petition.
One page?
One page.
One page. All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
There are some empty chairs. Thank you again, Josh.
Ever anxious for an audience.
All right, question period from partners and public. Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. I sent a small letter to the board the other day and wondered if they had a chance to consider the questions there, and if there was going to be a response.
And that letter was with respect to the notice of estoppel, Mr.
Yes.
McEwen. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to respond?
Certainly, I won't respond on behalf of the board. I believe Mr. McEwen was asking if the board is going to provide a response to his letter, but I could certainly talk about the estoppel notice if that was appropriate at this time. In a nutshell, I think each of the trustees has received the letter, but it hasn't come to board correspondence yet. And I think you had a conversation with Mr. Reed about the best way to facilitate that.
Yes, I did.
And so when that occurs, then the board will have a chance to debate it and discuss it and choose to take any action on that.
Okay. I do have some other questions, and there may be some other teachers online that have some questions as well.
Feel free.
So one question that I was asked to bring forward was in regards to this policy. Some people have been talking and suggesting to TCOCs that they should concentrate their efforts elsewhere if they're contemplating having children and then potentially being affected by this new policy, and whether they should continue to be TTOCs in this district or if they should go elsewhere. So the question would be, how does the district intend to increase recruitment for new teachers as word of the new contract restriction spreads? I'm not sure who might answer that, Chair.
I think the superintendent is writing your question down, so I assume he'll have a go at it.
Thank you very much through the chair. Perhaps just a couple of statements of responses to what the estoppel notice was. Estoppel is a notice of either party, the employer or the employee group, to refer to the intended language of the collective agreement that has, for whatever reason, changed over time. Most estoppel notices are given during collective bargaining, so that there's an opportunity at the table to perhaps discuss the situation and explore options moving forward. This particular estoppel notice is in reference to temporary positions that are posted. and TTOCs applying for those temporary positions. What we have seen over the years, as recently as this year, but certainly before, is that we have had, in some cases, multiple postings of the same job because TOCs have applied for the job, been awarded the job, and then said that they are not going to come and take the job because they are on a leave of absence. And because they have been a successful applicant for the job, they are entitled, they have been receiving benefits, particularly for a good example is parental leave, where these employees are not coming back to take that job, but they are entitled to benefits then because they were awarded the job. And those benefits typically are top up to parental leave, sometimes as much as 3 months of salary. We have had instances where we have had several teachers through successive rounds of posting of those positions being awarded and declined to take the position. So we have had examples where multiple benefits have been awarded for the same position, approximately 3 months salary. We have had instances where there have been 2, 3, even 4 teachers who have applied for being awarded and then declined the position. So in essence, sometimes upwards of a year's salary is being awarded to people cumulatively who are not intending to take the position. The language in the collective agreement that we are wishing to go back to talks about these temporary positions and the need for people who are going to be working the positions to be entitled to the benefits for them. And so this is an issue that is particular to Saanich. There may be other districts that are experiencing it as well, but the intention of the language was never to award benefits for somebody who was never intending to take the position. Certainly, there are situations such as medical leaves that the district will look differently on if there's an opportunity for that employee to potentially take that job at the conclusion of their leave that might be during the duration of the temporary assignment. In terms of recruitment, we have a very strong TTOC list and will continue to recruit for that. We don't foresee this as a potential problem of there not being enough TOCs because they're not able to receive benefits for which they are not working for them. So I don't see that as a particular concern for the district, Mr. Chair, that we would lose a significant number of TOCs because of this return to the intention of the language.
Mr. McEwen, anything further?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to just clarify something that I heard you say. It sounded like you were referring to the TTOCs being awarded the position. Our concern is not TTOCs being awarded or not being awarded the position. It's temporary and continuing teachers that we're concerned about. The question did reference the TTOCs as some of them are being suggested that they may not want to put as much effort in here. So I wanted to just double check that you weren't intending that that the language is only to apply to TTOCs.
Through the chair, your question was with regards to TTOCs, and that's what I referenced in my reply.
Okay. The clarification had to do with you saying awarding TTOCs these positions and them not taking it, and that being your concern as the matter of the estoppel, but it's not the TTOCs not being awarded the position that the association is concerned about. It was the question, but not the content of the estoppel.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure that was clear. And I think I will have a presentation for the board next month and some extra details.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions, other questions from partners or guests who may be attending? Thank you. Then we'll move on to item 6 in the agenda, which is the report from the chair. And you'll all be pleased to know that it's relatively brief this evening. This is the first in-person board meeting in almost 2 years, and it really is good to see you all in the flesh. And this follows, of course, the in-person committee day meetings of March the 8th. This decision follows the board motion to return to in-person meetings, board and committee meetings, when the provincial health office directives allowed in-person staff meetings in the district. And accordingly, this format ensures both consistency in the district, in practice, and in my view, respectfully, more cohesive meetings. We appreciate Teams and the technology, but the virtual means will never completely replace the effectiveness of in-person discussion and debate and nuances and all of those things and advantages that accompany in-person deliberations. Of course, as we know, Policy 9 permits remote attendance in certain circumstances, and it may be appropriate for the board through the policy committee to consider updating or reviewing that in view of the changes in technology and practice that have occurred through the COVID pandemic. And speaking of COVID, we've all recently learned of the relaxation of the restrictions of the pandemic by the PHO, including generally masking, and on April 8, vaccine passports. We've heard too that mask wearing in schools by staff and students will become optional after the school spring break. More generally, we're optimistic that these are indicative of the pandemic becoming an endemic and perhaps becoming a seasonal and minimal concern. And we are now pleased to be able to refocus more directly on student-centered educational decision-making by the board and the district, less preoccupied by dealing with COVID measures. That's not to say, in any respect, that our work has been compromised through COVID, but it has been complicated by COVID, and it has required additional time, energy, and adjustment. We're very excited tonight to be dealing with our new strategic plan. And I will not steal the superintendent's thunder from his report on this as we move into the next agenda item. But I wanted to note that after extending our current strategic plan and engaging in more than a year of development and consultation, the 2022 to 2027 draft plan comes before the board tonight for consideration and adoption. And I wish to thank in advance our partners, parents, teachers, administrators, our support staff, executive staff, our Indigenous communities, students, and our broader community, the survey respondents, and all the thoughtful consideration that went into assisting the board through SPAC, the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee, in developing the plan to be presented this evening. And a specific appreciation to the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee, its chair, Superintendent Eberwin, and our consultant, Mr. Mike McKay, for their assistance in guiding us through a lengthy and complex process. Trustees are aware that as a Vancouver Island board, we are a member of the provincial branch, regional branch, the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association. And some of our board, along with Secretary Treasurer Reid, attended the VISTA, Vancouver Island School Trustees Association, the March 5, 2022 semi-annual meeting. That was held virtually, so we're way ahead of them. I'll invite Trustees Van Well and Silzer, if they choose later on in reports from trustee representatives, to give further detail on the meeting. And the provincial organization, the BC School Trustees Association, is holding its annual general meeting April 21 to 24 in person in Vancouver. It will have a deep Indigenous and reconciliation focus entitled From Grief to Medicine, Moving Forward with Good Hearts. Vice Chair Van Well, I and possibly some of the other members of the board will attend to learn, hopefully contribute, think, network, and examine this issue of significant concern to all of us from a provincial perspective. Small matter, Superintendent Eberwin and I will be attending a Ministry of Education meeting April 4 to consider and discuss the peer review process for enhancing student learning. And then finally, spring break is almost upon us. And we will all enjoy the 2 weeks of break and closure. I will always wish us all well for all our breaks, summer, Christmas, holiday, spring break. But this break is particularly important because it comes after a 2-year trial for all of us with COVID. We closed our schools early on because we were told that was the best way to avoid transmission. And then we learned that that was the worst thing to do. We should maintain the educational program and the mental health and the socialization of our students. And we opened schools again. We received restrictions. We implemented them. We received varied restrictions and implemented them. There was, I hate the word, pivoting, adjusting, adapting, continuously over the past 2 years. And you've heard me repeatedly thank staff and our partners for rising to the challenge for this. All of which could have substantially distracted from the work that we do in delivering our educational services pursuant to our mandate, but it did not. I hope we come back almost normal after the break, and I'm proud of the district, all of us, in managing and weathering the storm over this interval while still providing the services to our students. And so our sincere thanks to our partners. I'm not sure we're completely out of it yet, but this is a very good time at our first in-person meeting to express our appreciation to the Saanich Teachers Association, Mr. McEwen, to the Saanich Administrators Association, Ms. Sinclair Wise, to the parents through Ms. Hiltz, if she could join us, and to QP 441 support staff through you, Ms. Welsh. And I wish you the best, all, for a well-deserved, needed, and restful break.
And you too.
Thank you, Trustee McMurphy. I appreciate my colleagues. Superintendent, we're on to your report, please. Trustee Holman?
Yes, and respectfully, Chair.
Yes.
As someone who comes from Ukrainian descent from both parents.
Yes.
With extended family in Ukraine, I would invite the board to acknowledge its support and heartfelt, I guess, wishes for peace in that region.
Very good, Trustee Holman. Thank you for that. And I think we join you collectively wishing for an early and diplomatic resolution and termination to the angst and the trauma which is occurring in that country. Thank you. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have always the distinct pleasure of having a spot on the board's agenda every month to talk about a superintendent's report. This one is particularly gleeful for me for a couple of reasons. One is, and the most important one is the proposed new strategic plan for the board for the next 5 years. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Bruce Underwood here from the nation who has come here this evening, not to necessarily speak to my report, although he's welcome to tell me how good it is afterwards if you would like. But, and I won't speak for Mr. Underwood, but I know it was for him to be here this evening, and of course for our district principal, Melissa Austin, in the Indigenous Education Department. I would like to start off before I talk about the strategic plan to do a little bragging about something that we have been able to excuse me for a second here. Of course, I have the wrong PowerPoint loaded up. Here. My apologies. Here it comes. that was the problem.
There you are.
Of course.
Want some help, Dave?
Yeah, I probably just when I just when I thought.
The Wi-Fi isn't.
It's worse when everyone's staring at a meeting. It always works fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. I lost my agenda already tonight.
That's right.
What I find particularly interesting is it's showing a PowerPoint that I do not have open on my desk, which I find very interesting and very bizarre. Okay, let me try this again here. Best laid plans. I'm not even breaking a sweat yet, so that's a good sign.
Because we're not staring at you hard enough.
Yes, staring at me hard enough. That's.
If we all stare at you.
That's,
Stand behind.
that's probably it.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to do that.
Yeah, there's a system.
Other than think that there's a-
I apologize for the delay.
It's got a little pocket.
This one has a.
Does that fit a little better?
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's try this. All right. Thank you for your patience. I want to brag a little bit about our new website that we have just launched this past weekend. This was an endeavor of love and sweat and tears over the last 14 months here in the district. This particular website has some wonderful new features that will help share the great work that's happening inside our district. Lots of modernized web pages that did exist already, such as Indigenous education, school registration procedures, and even transportation. We will be the envy of the province once other school districts take a look at our transportation page. It is interactive. It is a beautiful work that is due in large part to our IT department. We have brand new pages that showcase our students and our staff and our community. Things called Saanich Stories, news and updates and upcoming events, so people can find information relatively quickly about what's happening in our district. We know from previous history of our old website that there are certain pages that are accessed more often and people want information really quickly. So we've created things called quick access buttons for those. A brand new Board of Education page which profiles trustee bios as well as providing important committee and board meeting information in a handy search feature that it should be easy to find. We've made all of our policies and admin procedures searchable, and we provided easy access to the staff hub at the bottom of every page, a place that where teachers and support staff land regularly for information. Some other features of the website that were really important to us was to increase the accessibility. What does that mean? Well, we needed to really think about the intuitive design. Where would things logically be located? Where would people normally go and look for things to make sure that it seemed to make sense where the information was located? By making it highly visual and interactive, it engages people better. And it allows them to interact with the information in a more meaningful way. We made sure that there were various access points to information, such as the school registration page can be accessed from a number of different locations on the website, because people might go to schools, or they might go to district information, or they might go to another spot. Strong color contrast enables those that might have visual difficulties in reading the information more clearly. Having consistent headings on each page so that people know the priorities of the information. Something that took a tremendous amount of time was making sure that the information was scalable to various devices. That is not an easy task to do. and it creates huge layout challenges for each page to make sure that things scroll properly and they're searchable. You know, you might know something about a hamburger menu, which is those 3 lines that you find on websites. On a large screen, you might not need the hamburger menu, but on a tablet or a phone, you might. And so there needs to be that automaticity to the information. So a lot of background work has gone on to this. What this has enabled us to do is to provide a robust template for our school websites, and they're up next. They're going to take a while. We've got quite a few of them to do, but we have this robust district-wide template that we will use for our elementary, middle, secondary, and other schools in our system. And you'll see that roll out in the next few months. It's going to take some time to get there. But when you do visit our websites in the future, you will see a familiarity and a familiar organization to how the information is being presented. We are in something called a beta testing phase right now. When we are working on the website behind the scene, there are certain links that are linked to different sites in different ways, often to the old site, often to other websites out there. When you make a hidden website the active one, you hope that all of the links that you've created actually go to the places where they're supposed to. But because it's now a different address, we work hard to make sure, for instance, that those links are active. But even now, we found links that have become inactive. So we are in the beta testing phase where we continue to upgrade and make sure that links that we have there and connection points are active. We will be adding fresh content. In this particular slide, you see latest district news. That will be updated on a regular basis here in the board office, so that exciting things, the school successes and board meetings, et cetera, will make the front page of our website on a regular basis. We're expanding our picture library. 90 to 95% of the photos you see on this new website are photos of our students, our staff, our schools, our community. We have been challenged over the last 14 months, as you can imagine, with mask wearing. And so we've been limited as to the number of photos we can get. But with the lifting of the mask mandate, we should be able to get some more exciting photos. So you'll see that being refreshed over the years, over the months ahead. This has been a huge team effort. Many individuals, including, for instance, Principal Austin has had her hand in this cookie jar to help with the Indigenous education page and other information. But every staff member in this room has had some input, as well as others around the district. In particular, I want to thank the IT department with David Possel and Cody Henschel, who have put in hundreds of hours into this website, and to Lee Glancy and Shannon Davies upstairs here in the education wing. They have also put in dozens and dozens and dozens of hours to help load things and to help proofread and to make sure things are where they need to be. So a huge, huge thank you. I'd like to continue on to the strategic plan because that's the really exciting part of my presentation this evening, but I will take questions on the website at this point if there are, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Holman.
Thank you. And congratulations to all involved. Haven't had a lot of time to play with it, but what I've seen is really exciting. What is not available, from what I can see, are minutes from board meetings that occurred before 2019. I'm just wondering how would members of the board and members of the public have access to the historical records, and will that be added to the online search capabilities?
Thank you, Trustee Holman. At this time, we're not intending to add any minutes to committees or board meetings prior to 2019. It's a labor-intensive work, but we certainly have them archived. And if somebody is interested in them, we could certainly find them for them. But it hasn't been our priority to get the website up and running at this point, and nor do we have any immediate plans to go back and add additional minutes prior to 2019.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, the pre-2019 used to be on the S drive, and I didn't see them there. I'm just wondering, has that shifted, or will they be available through the S drive, or maybe someone could get?
We can look into that. I don't know about the S drive at this time. Thank you.
Any further questions for the superintendent on the website?
Now to the big item in my report. The board's next strategic plan, 2022 to 2027. I really like this particular saying of together we make a difference. And Mr. Chair, you indicated that in your report around the extensive work that's gone into the creation of this document. We have been very fortunate to have a community where there is strong collaboration. Here in the Saanich School District, we engaged in a year-long process. I went back to take a look at when the first SPAC committee was, and it was on March 3rd, 2021. So we're literally just over a year of formal involvement, although there was work prior to that that the board did around picking a consultant and a process and those types of things. The meat of the work, where we worked with partners and we came together as a community to look at what is important and what's going to make the biggest difference in student success, has been just over a year. This is a plan that will be in place for 5 years, while the themes will hopefully, if the board approves it this evening, will remain intact for those 5 years. The flexibility of the plan is built in as data emerges and we see if we need to take different directions to achieve the success that we want to achieve. An effective strat plan provides everyone with a clear picture for what our priorities are in Saanich for student success. The extensive consultation has proven once again that this is a very special place to work and learn and contribute. Over the year, we have developed 4 key themes, solidly based on data and evidence, both local and provincial, memorable and relatable, confirmed with our stakeholders through all sorts of means, including focus groups, staff meetings, PAC meetings, management team meetings, community visits, and of course, e-survey. This has provided the district with some clear direction for what's important to improve student success throughout our district. And it'll help us to align the resources that we need to improve. The strategic plan is focused on these 4 themes of literacy, to improve student literacy across the curriculum for all students, with a particular focus on early learning. Indigenous learner success, to engage in practices that support culturally responsive and barrier-free learning environments for Indigenous students. Under mental health and wellness, to promote mental health and well-being through social emotional learning and trauma-informed practice. And global citizenship, to provide opportunities and experiences that inspire learners to be knowledgeable, curious and active global citizens who support the well-being of oneself, family, community, and our environment. The board received, as did all partners, a copy of the strategic plan with the changes that were recommended by the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee, particularly around the 4th theme of citizenship, change to global citizenship, and some broader descriptors as to what that means included. And so this evening, I have the distinct pleasure of having a recommendation that the board approve the Saanich School Strategic Plan 2022 to 2027 as presented by the superintendent at this public meeting of the Board of Education.
Trustee Holman?
Yes, thank you. I have a question and then a motion. And I guess my question relates to some of the work that the board has done to prepare itself for strategic planning. And I'm referring to a book called Strategic Planning for Student Success, BCSTA. And I believe it was incorporated in the work done by the board to date. And there are 10 things under page 5, strategic plan components. There are 10, a mission statement, a vision statement, a statement of core values, a brief description of the district, location, demographics, current program and service offerings. 4 is a brief description of the current state and future challenges. 5 is an articulation of 3 or 4 strategic goals. 6 is a broad description of the strategies to be used to achieve the goals. 7, a description of the indicators to be used to monitor progress. 9 or 8, I've lost count, assignment of responsibilities for execution or implementation, and lastly, a description of internal and external reporting mechanisms. And I believe that the superintendent's report highlights the excellent work that has been done to date, but I don't believe it includes the last 4 components. And with that, I would move that the board refer the draft strategic plan to the Strategic Planning Committee, SPAC, and ask the committee to meet ASAP to formulate recommendations for the board that will, 1, take into account feedback received from the recent survey, 2, describe the strategies to be used to implement the plan and to evaluate and communicate progress, 3, provide a description of the indicators used to monitor success, including a description of internal and external monitoring mechanisms, and 4, assign responsibilities and establish timelines.
Thank you, Trustee Holman. Before I ask for a seconder, I need some clarification. Do you intend your motion, if it hits the floor and is passed, to replace adoption or to follow adoption?
To replace. I believe it's premature because I believe the plan is missing a description of strategies, indicators to monitor progress, assignment of responsibilities for execution, implementation, and a description of internal and external reporting mechanisms. I believe some of that is contained in some of the work by committee, but I don't believe it's reflected in the plan, and believe that that should be a logical next step before it's fully endorsed. I believe it's incomplete.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you. Your motion is intended to replace adoption. Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay, the motion does not come to the floor for want of a seconder. Trustee McMurphy.
I would move that the board approve the Saanich School Strategic Plan 2022-2027 as presented by the superintendent at the March 16th, 2022 public meeting of the Board of Education.
Seconded by Trustee Silser. Trustee McMurphy, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I have a second motion if this carries of acknowledgement, but I think that we've got a solid plan to go forward with. I think the committee has done stellar work, and I'm grateful for the contributions of the community writ large in the development of this plan. I think we've much work left to do, to implement this. That's fair enough, but I think the Strat Plan Committee has done its job, which is to bring us the planks of a Strat Plan. And I think that was the charge that they were given, and I think it's up to us now to decide whether or not this is the Strat Plan we want to go forward with. And if it is, then we get on with implementation. But for now, we need to decide where we're going, and I think this gives us the way forward.
Thank you. Trustee Silser?
Thank you, Chair. And further to Trustee McMurphy's comments and Trustee Holman, any strategic plan of a school district in BC is done in partnership with the Ministry of Education. And I think some of the concerns of Trustee Holman are taken care of by the annual review of strategic plans by the ministry. And so their insistence on data, evidence, and review and evaluation will be their part of the partnership that we have with the Ministry of Education. So I feel privileged to have been on the committee and to have worked with the other committee members, especially the community members, and with Mike McCain. He obviously wouldn't have led us astray in terms of any missing components, because I believe he's helped many other districts with their strategic plans. So I'm confident that we're not missing anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Holman.
Thank you, Chair. I would reiterate that I believe that there's been excellent work done thus far by SPAC, by the community, by the board. But I don't know that any one of us here could tell anybody asking how we will know when any of these 4 goals are achieved, how we will measure them, what will it look like to celebrate success. And I believe that the strategic plan that preceded this one had some difficulty also with identifying achievable goals that were specific, measurable, attainable, and time-sensitive, SMART goals. And so I cannot support this as a completed strategic plan. And I base that on a number of years' experience as a human resource generalist, working with boards, working with senior management and staff to implement right down through a performance planning, evaluation, and a compensation system that integrates the broad goals to practical steps that can be understood and evaluated and seen on the ground. And so as the plan has been presented so far, again, I believe there's some excellent work, but I don't believe that there is anything that addresses the last 4 components, as I noted in BCSTA's description of the components of a strategic plan. And my concern is that we may stumble in its implementation because we don't have a common understanding at the board level or at the staff level what each of those means and how we will know when they will be done or the timing for which they will be done. So respectfully, I can't support the motion.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Trustee Stelk.
Yes, I support the motion. I think that this is a governance piece, and a lot of it will be operationalized. It will come. We've heard from many of our partners. We've been working on it for more than a year. We've heard from many of our partners how important it is on the ground. It's and how important it is to get going, to put it into the schools, for the teachers, for the students, because at the end of the day, this is about student success. And I think the sooner that we can implement it, the better. Thank you.
Seeing no further hands, I'll put the question on the motion that the board approve the Saanich Schools Strategic Plan 2022-2027 as presented by the superintendent at this meeting. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy?
Chair, I'd like to present another motion.
Yes.
That the board express to all members of the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee and supporting staff its sincere appreciation for the contributions of their time, leadership, and representative expertise in the development of the next School District 63 Strategic Plan 2022-2027.
Second, Trustee Van Wel. Trustee McMurphy, I think it's self-evident, but do you wish to speak to it further? Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Anything further, Superintendent, in your report?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And on behalf of the board, thank you so much for leading us through this process.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
School successes are attached in the board pack, and we'll move to committee reports. First, the Education Directions Committee. Committee Chair McMurphy, please.
6. Okay. Items for, first of all, we had a very good presentation about modernizing learning services language, focusing on inclusive education and what that means. It was a very good discussion, and it's going to be that the same discussion is going to be carried out at various other levels and opportunities within the district to make sure that we have a common language that we're speaking throughout the district. Items for recommendation. Calendars for the next 3 years. I move that the board approve the local calendars for 2022-23, 2023-24, 24-25 as presented by the Assistant Superintendent with the exception of the following change. As presented by the Assistant Superintendent, the following change in the 2024 calendar, moving the non-instructional day from November 12th to November 18th, 2024.
Seconder.
Just if I could. Yeah, if I could just speak to the recommended change, it had to do with the 3-day week, and trying to make the weeks more balanced, and the consensus of the Ed Directions Committee was it was better to have 2 4-day weeks than a 3-day week, so.
Right. Anything further on the motion, folks?
And there's just one other point that I'm not sure where we are on it, but there was some discussion about whether this would be a rolling calendar with the next third year coming next year. And so we keep a 3-year calendar, but we have to update it every year in that sense. And if there are some things that we need to change in the second year or the third year going forward, that gives us the opportunity to do that when we review it for the adding on the next third year.
And I see staff heads nodding, Trustee McMurphy, so that's the correct rendition of the situation. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
And there was a letter from the BC Teachers Council about getting feedback from recently graduated teachers about their preparation for teaching. And to give credit to the STA, they have gone to great lengths to try to get feedback from their members to provide to the BCTC on that topic. And so we felt there was no further information no further action needed to be taken by the school district, with thanks to the STA.
Thank you. And that's your report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving then to Finance, Facilities and Technology, Trustee Van Well.
Thank you, Chair. We had no items for recommendation. We did have an item for discussion, which was the risk report that was included in our package. And there was a great discussion on different aspects of it. And I want to thank the Secretary Treasurer for putting together such a very thoughtful and inclusive report on our district and the risks that we have in the district and how they're being taken care of, the responses to them. And then for items for information, we had an update on the Prospect Lake site planning. We were told that there was the district of Saanich is saying that it's going to be $600,000 to construct the new parking lot attached to Prospect Lake, and that Secretary Treasurer Reid and Director Lum is going to try to see if there are some cost savings that we can find for that particular project, because it came in 3 times more than was originally what we were originally told. And we also received a report from the Budget Advisory Committee and the fiscal forecast for this month. And that's my report.
Thank you, Trustee Van Well. And then the Policy Development Committee Chair, pardon me, Trustee Holman.
Thank you, Chair. And my question relates to the risk report and the format. Specifically, I'm wondering, there are categories A to I that relate to, I believe, a variety of sort of operational categories. And I'm wondering historically where the categories came from, and specifically, it would be my belief that there are also risks associated with board governance that likely could benefit from a similar report. And I'm just wondering whether at any time has that been part of this report or managed in another way, because I believe that is a gap.
Mr. Reid.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the focus of the report is on operational risk. So really the lens is what could go wrong and what are the consequences of that. So it's focusing on operational risks such as data security, information technology data security, and a risk around protecting privacy, health and safety, financial risks, human resources risks. So it's the focus of the report is what can go wrong operationally, but it is the board's role and responsibility to ensure that the district is managing risk in an adequate way. So this very much ties into the governance role of the board. And for many of the risks, when we speak to the consequence of something going wrong, the consequence is educational programs are negatively impacted and the reputation of the district is damaged. And so all of it kind of interrelates into, in my view, interrelates into the role of the board to ensure that we're doing what we need to maintain public confidence and protect students, protect staff, and protect the reputation of the school district. So it's very much all interrelated.
Thank you. And you have a supplementary question?
Well, I think my question was twofold. Where did this come from? And has there been historically any risk assessment around governance aside from the operational risks?
Through the chair. So this report, we've been preparing this report for about 5 years now. And the risks that have been identified were identified through a process of consultation involving all of the management team, involving staff and partners, and discussions at the FFT committee kind of iteratively over the past 5 years. And so that is where the risks have come from. And over those years, particularly in the early years, there were things that were added to the risk register based on discussions that we had with partner groups and based on discussions that occurred at FF&T. And we've also, revised our assessments of risk and had discussions that have informed our risk responses. So it's something that has been iteratively formulated over a number of years, reflecting numerous conversations and also the conversations we have internally as a management team. What are we going to do about these things? Some of the risks, particularly the ones that are ranked higher, we talk about them every week. Aspects of how we're addressing those risks, and that's reflected in the description of our risk response. As to a specific risk response at the governance level, that's not the intention of this report, but I do think if there is a significant risk related to governance, it would tie into operations and outcomes in some way and should be reflected in this report.
Thank you. And the Policy Development Committee, please, with Committee Chair Stelk.
Thank you. So when we met there, the items that were discussed were there had been a motion from the board at the February 16th meeting that the matter of how committee agendas are established be referred to staff or report back to the policy committee. And that was done by the Secretary Treasurer by way of report dated March 3rd, 2022, and setting out the how the committee agendas were established. There was no recommendation following this report. And however, then we moved on to items for recommendation. Policy 1, talking about policy foundational statements and how they are a little bit out of sync now with some of the strategic planning themes and goals. And I recommend, the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Stelk, move that staff be requested to propose amendments to Policy 1, foundational statements that reflect the goals of the strategic plan as they relate to Indigenous student success and the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Second by trustee McMurphy. Trustee Stelk, you wish to speak further to the motion?
I think it's just, I think it's just that we need to recognize, particularly with our goal, Indigenous student success, that it should be in our foundational statements. We should be oriented towards our intention with respect to reconciliation. And it's currently not in our foundational statements. And so I think we're hoping to have a more fulsome discussion once staff comes back with some amendments that are also more cohesive with the strategic plan.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
And then the second motion, the committee recommends, and I, trustee Stelk, move that staff review and report to the committee an alternate placement for local design and use in board policy 1, foundational statements.
Seconder? Trustee McMurphy, anything to say?
Well, I added a little bit there with the help of my colleague that it was missing the report to the committee so that the staff will review a place for the logo design and report to the policy committee.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
And then policy 18, recruitment and selection of personnel. This has been moving along through the policy committee and out for sort of review. So the committee recommends, and I, trustee Stelk, move as the required notice of motion has been provided. I, trustee Stelk, move the following motion: that revisions to policy 18, recruitment and selection of personnel, be approved.
Seconder, trustee McMurphy. Anything further?
I don't think so. This has been in the works, and there were some changes made, and I think everybody's aware of them, yeah, hopefully.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Trustee Holman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to respectfully add to the Chair of the Policy Committee's report to acknowledge that there were a number of policies relating to how neighboring districts manage their committee agendas and other items under policy 7. And I also, and there was no take up to review whether there was any, policies that others were adopting in their districts as to whether or not that could benefit us. I also want to acknowledge an inconsistency that items discussed, 1, committee agendas, was always referenced as policy 7. And you'll note in the other items on the agenda, the policy number is reflected. And I believe that there should be consistency and made that recommendation at committee as well. And that wasn't taken up. But I do feel that that's important to note. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Holman. All right, that concludes committee reports, and we'll move then to item 13, reports from trustee representatives, if there are any. All right, trustee Vanwell.
Yeah, so trustee Silzer and Chair Dunford and I attended the last of this month, and it was it's too bad that we weren't able to meet in person. There was a group of people that were called the Stand Up for Mental Health. It was a group of comics who would come, and they would and their jokes were about the things that were reflected in them, the things that they had gone through. And they had learned that they were able to deal with these issues that they had through comedy. And so it was an interesting to see how each person's take was on their mental health and how they dealt with it in a comedic way. It was quite enjoyable. really was. And then we just had a bunch of committee reports that we got to listen to. So, but yeah, the stand up for mental health was really, really an interesting and funny way to deal with mental health.
Thank you. Are there any other reports in addition to Trustee Van Wells? All right, thank you, Trustee Van Well. We'll move then to item 14, correspondence, and there are three items there to note. Is there any discussion? Trustee Holman.
Yes, thank you. I will begin by clarifying what could be a perceived conflict of interest and just clarify, I'm going to speak to item 1. I am not a member of any political party, haven't been for about 3-4 years now. So I would make a motion to refer the letter from Dr. Starla Anderson to the policy committee. And I would respectfully remind the board that in our first year, I recall that access was given to our federal member of parliament.
Well, before you speak to your motion, Trustee Holman, let's get it on the floor if we can. So your motion is that Dr. Anderson's letter be referred to the policy committee?
Well, I wanted to acknowledge her letter. I wanted to acknowledge that she was given, or what she states was given a policy determination. And that policy determination, I believe, is inconsistent with information that we were given around Elizabeth May's participation at the school level.
Okay, so what I'm grappling with is what your motion is.
I'm moving that the letter from Dr. Starla Anderson be referred to the policy committee for review.
All right, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Silzer, do you wish to speak? I cut you off because I wanted to get the motion dealt with. Now you wish to speak to it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it does raise an interesting question. I think it would be beneficial to have policy. I do recall, as I said, other political interests being integrated in classroom work, and recognize there's a difference between a member of parliament and what this letter represents. But if I'm not mistaken, we don't have policy, and I believe that would be helpful for us to review.
Trustee McMurphy.
I just want to ask a question first, and that is if the letter is accurate in its statement that says district employees aren't allowed to speak at events sponsored by political parties. Would the superintendent, the secretary treasurer be able to comment on the accuracy of that?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I believe the member of our community is slightly mistaken in what was understood at the time. The request that came up from the Learning Services Department was that a staff member was being requested to speak at an NDP event. And the response that was provided was that staff members typically don't speak at political events for parties, but that doesn't prevent anybody from going as a private citizen to share their points of view. But we do not, in practice, speak at political party events, and that was the indication that was provided to us at the time.
But we don't have any policy saying that staff can't.
There's no policy nor admin procedure. The admin procedure is around electioneering in schools and those types of things, but nothing around not speaking, no. But our general practice in the past has been that we don't represent ourselves as district employees speaking at a political event.
And my second question is, I think obviously this needs some exploration because if this letter is accurate, I thought, what a golden opportunity to speak about our efforts in reconciliation to anybody, political or not. And we don't have any policy, but there's clearly some direction being given to staff. I guess this is accurate, this statement here, that they're not allowed to. So I'm just not sure that the policy committee is the place to discuss it, because it sounds I just don't know where would be the correct place, but it seems a bit awkward to have it at policy. I don't know, if maybe something that could be discussed in HR.
I've got Superintendent, Trustee Holman, again, and Trustee Silzer. Right. Okay. Mr. Superintendent Eberman?
Just to clarify, if perhaps I didn't articulate this as well as I meant to, it's not that we told staff they weren't allowed to speak, but that there wouldn't be official district presentation on something at a political party event. That they could certainly go as a private citizen, but they wouldn't be representing the district at any particular political party. In terms of the placement for this, it sounds like it might be appropriate for an administrative procedure in terms of operationalizing things for staff, because that's where the current admin procedure is around electioneering in schools. But that would certainly be for board direction.
Well, it just seems. I'm a bit perplexed. If the North Saanich Residents Association had asked for someone from the board, a trustee or a staff person, to speak about our efforts in reconciliation, we probably would have said yes, I'm guessing. And so I'm trying to figure out why we would say no if it's a political party, because it seems to me that's even more important to try to, get our message out and about. So I don't know if
Point of order.
right place or not.
Through the chair, I think the understanding at the time was that this was a NDP event, and they were asking for district staff to come and speak on a topic. And our place in our process in the past has been not to align district staff with any particular party on any particular event, but certainly to share information. But the impression that was left was this was an NDP event, and not so much as a community event, but a political party event. And we didn't want to be perceived as aligning ourselves with any particular party. Again, we didn't restrict the person from going as a private citizen to talk about the work, but we said it's not appropriate for somebody to be representing the district in this particular type of venue.
It's not appropriate for a private citizen to represent them.
Just a minute.
Pardon me?
But it wouldn't be appropriate for a private citizen to say, this is what the Saanich School District.
Trustee Holman, this is becoming a dialogue between you and the superintendent. I'm going to go to Trustee Holman.
There's a motion that has been seconded.
Yes.
And the debate or the dialogue, I believe, is delving into the policy as opposed to specific to the motion, which is to refer this to policy committee. And I'll remind the board that our policy defines the policy development committee as its powers and duties twofold. There's four, but I'm going to read two. The 3.2.2 is review proceed need for new board policies as and when referred to the committee by the board, which is this motion. And 3.2.4, review changes, deletions, or additions to administrative policies if referred to the board for advice. So the motion was to refer this letter to committee, and I believe that would be the appropriate place to further understand, practice, the need for policy, the difference around political versus other societies, respectfully.
Yes, thank you. And the essence of Trustee McMurphy's comments were that she's not sure that that's the best place to refer it.
But I am now.
So it was germane to the motion. Trustee Silzer?
I support the motion. I believe it belongs in policy.
Thank you. Are there further comments, debate, discussion on the motion?
Well, Could I just add one
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
So I belong to a church that organizes community events all the time about all sorts of things like refugee sponsorship or the environment or you name it. And the same could be said for that. No, district staff doesn't talk to religious organizations, but I think it's really worth delving into in policy and not just procedures.
Thank you. So I see no further hands. I'll put the question. All of those in favor of the motion to refer to the policy committee? Opposed? And the motion is carried. Thank you.
Clear into policy.
Exactly. All right. Now, we're still on item 14, correspondence. That deals with this Sarla Anderson letter. Is there anything to be said or done, trustees, with respect to the other two pieces of correspondence? If not, we will move on then to the second question period of the evening, to partners and public, if there are any questions. Mr. McEwen.
Thank you. Sorry, there was something that eventually struck me about Mr. Everwood's response, Superintendent Everwood's response, that I want to double check.
To your earlier question.
Sorry?
To your earlier question?
Yes.
Okay.
The comment was about reverting to existing language to avoid or to move away from something the language didn't intend, I believe was the nature of the comment. And in looking at the contract and the language, it goes back to 1988, virtually unchanged. The practice, I believe, is also virtually unchanged since 1988. So my concern, I guess, is how far back are we going to say that we've deviated from something in order to make it a point of estoppel?
How far back? That's the essence of your question.
How far back are we looking at the contract language to say that we've deviated from something that we need to stop doing that?
Is anyone able to respond to that? I don't think we have an answer tonight, Mr. McEwen.
That's all right. I will send that in an updated letter and make that part of what you can debate at your leisure.
And you'll be presenting as well,
I'll be presenting as well in April, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for partners or guests, if any? Hearing none, thank you. We'll move on to item 16, other business as submitted, and that's over to you, Trustee Silser.
Here. And thank you everyone for your comments beforehand, but this motion that I'm making is that the board explore ways to have WSANET Nation participation at the board governance level.
So let me stop you there, and that'll be your first motion.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder? Trustee Holman. All right, carry on, please, Trustee Silser.
This motion supports the strategic plan priority of Indigenous learner success. It is about truth and reconciliation between the Saanich Board of Education and the WSANET people. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission shed light on the true effects of colonial settlement, not only across Canada, but also here on the Saanich Peninsula. At Education Directions Committee last month, Principal Melissa Austin spoke about the history of formal authority over K-12 education of Indigenous students on the peninsula. In 1989, I believe, the WSANET people were granted authority over education in their nation. The WSANET School Board and School District 63 have a partnership for the education of on-reserve students who very often go back and forth between the two systems. In the past year, I was fortunate to be a trustee member of the Strategic Planning Advisory Committee with Bruce Underwood representing the nation. He arranged and facilitated 2 sessions for trustees to hear directly from community members at Sayout and Sartlip Reserves. It was an honor to sit with mothers, grandmothers, and students and to hear their passion for their children's learning. At the last SPAC meeting, both Bruce Underwood and Melissa Austin told us that community members asked them about the late addition of a 4th priority, citizenship. The Wasanich community is listening to us, and they care about the strategic planning exercise. We've learned from directors of instruction, Carly Hunter and Monica Branagh, and other teacher leaders in School District 63, that student success is tied to the feeling of belonging. And that applies especially to Indigenous students. They need to feel a sense of connection with other students, their teachers, administrators, and support staff. They need to see themselves everywhere in the system. The motion before you is based on the premise that having an enduring First Nations presence on the Saanich Board of Education will benefit Indigenous learners. Much goodwill has built up between the district and the Wasanich people over the last few years, thanks to the superintendent and director of instruction, Hunter, and especially thanks to the passionate work of Principal Austin and Bruce Underwood. We trustees have an opportunity before the end of our term to take this action towards reconciliation and support a major goal of our new strategic plan. My second motion is about how we do this. But the first motion, I think, is really important that we get a sense from all trustees that we actually believe that this is a worthy exercise. We send that message. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Selzer. Trustee McMurphy and then Trustee Holman.
I believe as a seconder, I get the next opportunity, Chair.
No, that's not correct. No. Trustee McMurphy was next.
I have an amendment, Chair. To put a comma after the word participation and insert the word including. So it would read that the board explore ways to have Wasanich Nation participation, including at the board governance level.
I'm going to ask if there's agreement for that or if a motion is necessary. Does any trustee object to that amendment?
I have a question about it.
Okay, let's have a motion then. Do you want to make your motion in those terms?
For a seconder.
All right, is there a seconder for that? For trustee Stelk. Thank you. Okay. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes. First of all, I want to acknowledge the significant work that Trustee Silzer has done on this file. I think it's been great, and her enthusiasm and research and preparation is a model for all of us. So thank you very much, Trustee Silzer. My only hesitation with the motion as it's worded is that it says this is the way you can participate. And I think that is one of the ways we might engage in a conversation to say, how do you want to participate? It may be at the governance level. There may be other ways that the nation would like to participate. So I think it's important to put the governance notion out there, but I don't think it should be exclusive. So that's why I'm saying explore ways to have Wasanich Nation participation, including at the governance level, but by that word including, not excluding anything else that might come up in the discussion about participation.
On the proposed amendment, Trustee Holman. Oh, sorry, Trustee Silzer.
I guess I'm wondering whether that weakens the motion. I think I understand the intention that that the intention is to increase flexibility. So I guess I didn't think that this was prescriptive in any way, that it's about exploring ways to have Indigenous participation, not only at the student, teacher, administrator level and at the support staff level, but also that there be someone always at this table, just like we want there always to be Indigenous teachers and Indigenous people throughout our education system. So that's why I hesitate to just agree to that, because I want it to be a strong statement that we believe Indigenous people should be at this table. The Wasanich, somebody from the Wasanich Nation should always be at this table. So that's why I'm not agreeing to just include it.
Okay, thank you. And Trustee Holman.
Yes, thank you for coming back to me. That spurred a response. I thank Trustee Silzer for the clarity in her last statement, because I think there is participation at all levels incorporated into administrative classroom school. And I think the amendment to add including does take away from the intent, which is at the governance level. And so I speak against the amendment.
I have myself on the list, and unless I can be persuaded differently by subsequent speakers, I intend to support this amendment because I actually infer that it strengthens the motion. It does not detract from the idea of governance. That still remains there. It says it. But it's expanding it beyond that to say what other ways, I think Trustee McMurphy said this, what other ways might the nation be able and want and express an interest in participating? So I think governance is a given because it's included with the word, it's attached to the word including. I think what is important is that it expands it to other possibilities as well. So with all respect, I don't see it as diluting the motion. I think it strengthens it. So I'll support it for that reason. I don't have any other speakers on the list. So who Trustee Stelk, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Sorry, I missed you.
That's okay. I just think this is a time to move respectfully, cautiously, and to consult, and I will support the motion, to the amended motion.
The amendment.
Because I think it provides that flexibility and that respectful element of consultation.
All right, thank you, trustees. So I'll put the question on the proposed amendment to add a comma after the word participation and to then insert the word including, so that it would, the amended motion, if this amendment passes, would read that the board explore ways to have Masonic Nation participation, including at the board governance level. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? The motion, the amendment is carried. I'll return to discussion on the motion as amended. Trustee Holman.
Yes, thank you. I very much appreciate all the opportunities that we've had for engagement with our First Nations community members, neighbors, and I would very much value the added components of education and perspective and cultural awareness and firsthand. I brought today an article that was in our local paper about a February report on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I think you know, to sort of read that, filter it, I would very much like the perspective of what I read and how it pertains to the work that we're doing. I'd like to hear that firsthand because I filter this through my lens and the reporter and the paper is filtering it through their lens. And we often have much, well, not often, we have much to learn. And I believe that at the governance level or other ways only benefits the work that we do in interest of the students that we serve.
Thank you, Trustee Holman. Seeing no further hands, I'll put the question on the amended motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Trustee Selzer?
My second motion is that the board approve an ad hoc committee to be appointed by the chair and supported by staff to research options for First Nations participation at the board governance level, consult with the WSÁNEĆ Nation, and report to the board at the June 15th board meeting.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to that motion? Trustee Holman. Trustee Selzer?
Thank you. So this motion is, I'll go through it line by line, I guess. The reason I'm proposing to move our intention forward by proposing an ad hoc committee is because I think obviously it would be with the Policy Development Standing Committee, but this is special. This is a special effort associated with the strategic plan. It's a little more work because we're learning new things and we're making a special effort to consult with the nation. So that's why the proposal for an ad hoc committee. And according to our policy 7, appointed by the chair, and I assume supported by staff. And the first thing the ad hoc committee would do would be to research options for Indigenous participation at the board governance level. And as I've shared with everybody, and as I've learned from the BCSTA, there are many districts throughout the province who have First Nations participation at the board. And it's not more than one way. And say there are 20 different variations of what that can be. I think before we consult with the nation, we need to know what the options are. And we need to do our homework. And I think that's the most respectful thing to do before we consult with the WSÁNEĆ people. I certainly mean no disrespect with respect to this isn't to prescribe anything, but it's to say, it's like inviting somebody to your home and saying at the door, what would you like for dinner? Well, actually, as the host, I want to make that guest feel comfortable and welcome and show them that I've made a special effort to accommodate them. So in this case, we're not just saying, oh, let's go and talk first and then do some research, or talk and maybe we don't even know what's possible. So what I'm saying, first of all, is know what's possible, legally and otherwise. The BC School Trustees Association is we're part of the organization. One of the benefits of being a member is to have their expertise and their connections. So, and with full consultation, I think maybe my original motion made it look like we're just going to do it quick and dirty. No, I'm not I'm not saying that we need to come up with recommendations right away, but we need to start, I think, right away. And about doing research before we consult, I look back, I have been listening carefully to First Nations people in the last 3 years. And one of the things that I learned from Bruce Underwood, actually, at our professional development day in September 2019, I went to his workshop and it was excellent. Learned a lot about the WSÁNEĆ people. But he said, my notes from that time was, there's pressure on Indigenous people in Indigenous education because they're expected to have answers to all the questions. So then, as part of our strategic planning preparation, I attended an online presentation by sponsored by the Ministry of Education on VESSEL, and the whole session was called, the title of it was Comprehensive Approaches to Strategic Indigenous Engagement and Student Success. And it was a lecture, presentation by Dr. Lorna Williams, who's a UVic professor in Indigenous education and particularly language revival. And what really, really resonated for me was when she said, First Nations communities are always asked to teach others about their cultures. It means knowledge keepers are really busy and often on an unpaid voluntary basis. As the TRC and UNDRIP recommend, people need help, and they need help understanding the First Nations communities, and that's where they go for help, to the communities. But it's a huge responsibility on those people, and you have to understand the demands that are on them as they're trying to engage not only with people in education, but in health and in economic endeavors and everywhere. So I think the most respectful thing, the most respectful way to consult with the WSÁNEĆ people is to be prepared, to do the work, not to go to them and say, what do you think? And then say, oh, give us some ideas here. No, it's to say, this is what we've learned through our organization, the BCSTA, and what other First Nations and school districts in the province of BC have come up with. And there are all these different permutations. There are at least 4 general categories, and then it goes from the formal ways of making applications to the Minister of Education, to having an Indigenous student always at the table, to you name it. So what I'm saying in this proposal, in my motion, is let's do our homework and then we can consult. Not necessarily rush. No, that won't happen. But respectfully, listening, learning together with the WSÁNEĆ people what a good balance would be for us to have their voice at this table and to share the responsibility, essentially, for the WSÁNEĆ students, the Indigenous students in our district.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move an amendment by substitution, if I may. I would move that the board consult with the WSÁNEĆ Nation regarding their views on WSÁNEĆ Nation participation in School District 63 board governance, and that staff be requested to propose ways this consultation might be initiated.
Is there, Trustee Stelk, you're seconding that? Do you have a copy of this? Or does Ms. Clancy,
I think so. Yes.
I think having it in writing might be helpful.
I did circulate it earlier too.
Yes, you did.
I'll ask her if she has it.
If I could have it in writing, that would be great.
Oh,
Voice.
it was
Here's the
emailed to us.
I didn't send it to you.
I can forward it right now, I've got it.
Oh, okay.
Point of order.
Yes, trustee Holman?
I interpret what's proposed as significantly changing the motion. And it's not clear to me how by substitution that is permitted. Could the chair clarify
Well,
to what procedure that would apply, or Robert's rules, or what are the things that help us govern the proposal?
well, before I get to your notice, your point of order, I'm trying to ascertain what the amendment actually is. And once, I'll get back to you on that, trustee Holman, once we can do that.
Okay, I've got it here. Would you like me to read it?
Would you read it, please, Mr. Reed?
I have it here too.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
board consult with the Wasanich Nation regarding their views on Wasanich Nation participation in SD 63 board governance, and that staff be requested to propose ways this consultation might be initiated.
Thank you. So back to your point of order, trustee Holman, which I understand to be essentially that the proposed amendment by substitution is incongruent with the fundamental purpose of the motion. And according to Robert's rules in section 12, there are a number of ways amendments can be made, and we're familiar with most of them. They can be made by addition, by deletion, by changing things, by substituting words and sentences and paragraphs. But it also provides for the idea of substituting another approach to the original motion. And that's the way I read this. This is not in conflict with the idea of proceeding with this idea of exploring, but it is an alternative way of doing that to some degree. And so for that reason, I've accepted it and we'll debate that motion. So do you wish to debate the proposed amendment?
I wish clarity if that's part of the debate.
Yeah.
So is the intended amendment replacing a subcommittee, and that would be handled by the committee of the whole, by the board? What would be the body that would engage in that consultation?
Perhaps if I could speak to the motion, accepted.
Yeah, excuse me. We've dealt with your point of order. You haven't yet spoken to your motion, so trustee McMurphy needs to deal with that first. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Chair. And again, I want to acknowledge the leadership of trustee Silzer in this. Your research is amazing, going back all those years to all those events. That's great. I appreciate what you've brought forward to remind us. I think the motion that we've already adopted addresses many of the concerns you just raised, trustee Silzer, which said that we will explore ways about the participation. So I think that's a given. That's going to happen. We've already adopted that one. So I guess what I'm addressing is number 2, and that is, in part, my motivation has been that phrase that I've heard many times in the context of First Nations representations is nothing about us without us. And so what I was trying to do in my amendment was to say we start by going to the nation, because we don't have all the answers. We can't presume what they want, how they want to approach it, if they want to approach it. And I think that's where we need to go first. We can't get way out in front and then say, how do you like us so far? I think we need to try to go hand in hand to see what their views are, to see how we might, put our views, their views, our collective views together to come up with a plan that is not something that we conceive and then take to them. I think it's something that we have to develop together, otherwise it doesn't have the authenticity that I think we all are seeking. So, and the reason that I've suggested that staff be requested to propose ways this consultation might be initiated is because we have staff who are superb in this department and could help us with that kind of guidance. And because I don't think anybody is opposed to the general thrust and the general nature of this, but I think we have to be really sensitive to how we go about it. And I'm just hoping that we can have a kind of a joint process rather than one where we develop the plan and then go to the nation. They may not want to participate at all. Who knows? They may say we have our own school board, we have enough responsibility, and we don't even know how they might want to react. They might want to say, no, we want to have representation by all four nations, or all four bands, not just the West End. There's so many things we don't know that we can't assume or presume. So I'm just advocating for a little bit of caution and taking steps very slowly and very carefully, because the last thing we want to do is have this particular train go off the rails. So everything you've said, Trustee Silzer, I agree with. I'm just saying, let's not get the order of events out of line. Let's try and make it as much of a joint effort as we possibly can, starting at the very beginning. I don't think we want to go to the nation and say, we have this idea about how you can participate, how do you like it? And I know that's not what you're suggesting, but I also think that even the way we approach the nation, we have to be careful with, because we need to find out if they even want to talk to us about this. And we are assuming they do, and I'm hopeful that they do, and I'm hopeful that they will. But I don't think we can make assumptions. I don't think we can presume anything. And I think we have to be genuinely open and ready to hear what they have to say. They might say, we don't like anything you do, and we don't like how you do it. And, we want you to change everything. And we're going to have to take a big, deep gulp and say, okay, let's talk about that. But and I think we can do our homework. As the first motion says, we'll explore the ways this might happen. We can explore the ways it might work, but we need to talk with the nation before we go too much farther. So I hope everybody will support the motion, because I think it is a great initiative. I think it is forward-looking. And as I said before, I appreciate the work you've done to bring it forward to us. But I'm just trying to make it more of a joint effort rather than a school board effort.
And Trustee Holman?
Could I have the proposal read back before I comment? Because I think.
Yes, if you could do that, please, Mr. Reid.
The amendment,
Yes.
that the board consult with the Wasanich Nation regarding their views on Wasanich Nation participation in SD 63 board governance, and that staff be requested to propose ways this consultation might be initiated.
Thank you. And I will support the amendment. I think what I like about it, in addition to what's been vocalized, is that it's a board discussion. I have concern about the way in which our subcommittees are working. I think it creates two tiers. I think it creates added administration. I think the delegation or appointment chair to the subcommittee has some flaws. So I think having the board engage in the question that's put, I think is very inclusive and comprehensive. I think a committee of the whole might be an option staff consider. So I do support the amended motion. Thank you.
Trustee Stelk and then Trustee Silzer.
Sure. Just leading off, I just think using Trustee Siltzer's dinner metaphor, I think we're at the invitation stage and we might be looking at a potluck dinner. But I think we are at the invitation stage. And The TRC said that reconciliation was about respect. I would like to recognize the decades of work that have been done in this district. And I'm so grateful to Principal Austin for outlining the history, how it's not just a couple of years, it's 40 years or whatever it is. I can't do the math quickly, but it's a long-standing relationship and a collaborative one between the Wasanich School Board and the Saanich School Board. We have education agreements for the future, you know, which are based on working together through dialogue, building understanding and open communication. And this is respectful. I think it's time to listen carefully and move forward respectfully. And I'm reluctant to be constrained by time restraints. I think that recognizing the significant collaboration that's happened in the past, I think that this motion is an invitation to build on that and to, again, use the resources that we have here with Principal Austin and our longstanding collaborative relationship with the school board to consult.
Thank you. Trustee Silzer.
I have no problem with consultation, respectfully sharing and learning together. And I guess I've been too specific in a way, because the whole proposed amendment could fit under the second bullet. And I guess what I object to or have a problem with is the general nature of this. Like, what's the goal here? You're gonna go and consult about what? Participation? And are we going to come back and say, well, who's going to do this work? So I guess what I was trying to do was, in proposing the original motion, is to say somebody's got to do the work. And the policy committee has a full agenda. And an ad hoc committee can help do all these things and with staff actually set out a whole consultation plan and set out all the options that are available, but somebody's got to do the homework. And like I say, it's not respectful to people to just say, can I take your time to talk? No, you have to talk, you have to plan and talk about specifics, or at least say, be more specific. And so I guess I'm not, I think we're talking about the same thing, and my proposal is more specific as to how it's going to be done. What we're going to do, we're going to consult, of course, it's there. Substituting the whole thing means you're taking out the legwork. And what I was attempting to do was say, this is how we can move it along so that, given the fact that we only have 5 more regular board meetings, that we'd actually maybe have something come out of this before our term ends.
Thank you. Trustee Van Wel.
Thank you, Chair. And I will reiterate what our fellow trustee said, to thank you very much for all of the research that you put into this. It's very fulsome indeed. I agree that this needs to be done, but I also think that we shouldn't, I don't think that we should give it a timeline. I think it's something that will evolve as we go through, as we look into it and we do our consultations. But I think that, as Trustee McMurphy said, I think we need to do it together as opposed to going to them and saying, this is what we want to do. I think we need to ask the questions first. We need to find out whether this is something that they want to do with us before we plan to move forward with it. So I would support Trustee McMurphy's substitution.
Thank you. Superintendent Everett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Without sounding like a record that's going around and saying ditto on what people are saying, I did want to add my comments around the inclusivity that's being expressed this evening and to thank Trustee Silzer for, again, her homework and her research into this to date. I do take Trustee McMurphy's words to heart around nothing about us without us. And I believe, and it is my perspective, that the most respectful thing to do first is to go and have a conversation. And that could be something that staff could work with Principal Austin on around what that looks like. And even having this kind of conversation with the nation to say, this is what we are thinking about. What are your thoughts about this? I think is probably the more respectful way of approaching it. And even if we came out of that meeting with a suggestion from the nation that please go and explore what options are and come back again, I think the risk we have of doing work about the nation without the nation knowing about it is where we could find ourselves in some murky water in terms of the concept of talking about us without us even knowing you're talking about us. And so I would, although I obviously don't vote on the motion, I am in support of an initial conversation that staff could work with Melissa on around what that could look like. It could possibly be an LEA meeting. It could be all sorts of things that where the entire board could be involved in that initial conversation. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, trustees, I'll put the question on the proposed amendment by substitution. All in favor? Opposed? And the amendment is carried. Now back to debate on the motion as amended, if any. Trustee Holman.
At the risk of stating the obvious, I think that it is respectful to ask. I think because within the context of an upcoming election where there will be 7 positions to which any member of the nation could run for elected office, through that process alone, there could be representation at this table. I think the other obvious question is compensation for the time. If it's not a position on the board, but an additional way in which we consult, I think I would welcome a conversation about how to compensate to any expectation for that participation and consultation.
Thank you. Trustee Selzer.
I really appreciate the superintendent's words, and I appreciate Trustee McMurphy and Trustee Stelk's experience with the nation and their knowledge of how things might be perceived. And I would really hope that in any exercise, and perhaps the superintendent put his finger on it and said, well, maybe some initial consultation would result in a joint request for the options to be set out by, say, Gordon Lee at the PCSTA. There are some incredible ways in which knowledge keepers, Indigenous student representatives make a difference at the board governance level with respect to Indigenous education. So it's a matter of the homework has to be done, and it is a learning exercise that can be done with both the nation and the trustees and staff. So I look forward to that exercise.
Thank you, Trustee Silver.
Still, and I'm assuming that we're keeping it at the board level, not at a committee level.
Well, for this, if this passes, at this point at least.
I thought we just,
We haven't voted on the motion. It's like we voted on the amendment,
okay.
but it's essentially the same thing. So seeing no further hands, I'll put the question for those all in favor of the motion as amended by substitution. Any opposed? And it's carried.
Was that unanimous, Chair?
Yes, it was. And I want to note that, and I also want to express my appreciation to you as well, Trustee Silzer, for the fundamental work you committed to in bringing this to the board, and to the thoughtful and careful discussion by all trustees in moving this very, very careful and sensitive matter forward. Thank you. And with that, friends.
Sorry, board.
Yes.
Chair.
I'm chair, not board. You're the board. I'm only the chair.
We had a couple members on earlier who did want to ask a question, but apparently we're not able to get their hands up quickly enough. Is it possible to allow an additional question from one member?
Let's have a go, Mr. McEwen. If they made the trouble to come and they tried and we couldn't get to them, are they ready now?
I believe so.
All right. Somebody up there wishes to ask a question?
Michelle's got her hand up there.
I can't see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Hi, I just had a question. I'm a teacher at Stellies, and I have a number of colleagues who are concerned about the estoppel on the hiring for temporary contracts. And one of the questions was, because so many of us in high school are both continuing contracts and temporary contracts. So for example, I'm at a 0.5 continuing contract, and then I get temporary contracts to top that up. So I would work full-time 4, 5, 6 years in a row, but I still, because of the notice of intent to lay off, need to apply every September to top myself up to 1.0. Will the estoppel impact continuing teachers who work full-time year after year in being able to get their benefits if they go on a mat leave over the summer and can't then apply for temporary contracts that would bring them up to their normal working level?
Thank you. Are you clear on that?
I'm clear in the question. I'm not able to provide an answer at this time. That'd be something I would take back to the HR director. The intention of the estoppel notice, just to be clear, is to provide opportunities for those teachers who are able to take the position to receive the benefits associated with that position. But I'm happy to have a conversation with Mr. McEwen afterwards, maybe not this evening, and to continue to explore that. I know these questions and others were talked about extensively at the bargaining table, but I don't have a succinct answer this evening.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Ms. McEwen, was there someone else who wished to ask a question while we're doing this?
There were a couple other people that were here, but I'm not seeing them now. I don't know if Michelle had a follow-up.
I have a series of questions that we'll make sure get included in that presentation for April. I know that for high school teachers in particular, with the 2 hiring periods for semester 1 and semester 2, are quite concerned.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. This is an ongoing matter, as you can see from the discussion this evening. Seeing no further questions, and we have reached the end of our agenda, is there any objection to adjourning at this point?
Can we stay for another couple hours?
Thank you, and I declare the meeting adjourned.
Oh, boy.
Earliest one we've had in a